everyone, this is Brandon, and welcome to the first Hobby Clinic episode. In this video, I'm going to be taking a look at some minis painted by other people that have submitted their work, and they've told me what they want to improve on. So we're going to look at their work. We're going to do a Photoshop paint over to help them improve, and we're going to celebrate what they are really good at already, because I think that's something that's really important to do. This is the first time I've done something like this for a video, so I'm really excited about it. If it's something that you like, let me know in the comments. Let me know by throwing it a like, subscribing, hit the bell. I don't post that many videos, but when I do, you'll get notified, and that's pretty cool. So yeah, we have about six different minis we're going to be looking at. So let's go ahead and jump in. All right, so for this first miniature, it was submitted by Archon Sarah. And she asked me to focus on blending and contrast. So as far as blending goes, something to keep in mind when you're doing that is you're going to want to use layers that are more like a glaze. So they're going to be a little bit thinner, a little more transparent, and it's going to take more time if you want that like soft transition. And for contrast, you already have contrast in this miniature, but we can push it. Because when we look at this miniature, it's mostly dark, especially with like this green in here, and even the purple is kind of on the darker end. And when it's on top of this snowy base, you get contrast in that way. But I'm pretty sure she meant she wants more contrast in the actual model itself. So I'm going to show her how we can go about doing that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in a little bit. There we go. And I'm going to focus on the green first. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get some of this dark like green that she has in here. It's almost like a black color. I'm going to go to my brush tool, and I'm going to make the opacity of it around 33%, just to kind of simulate a glaze. It's kind of like as if you were adding water or like Lamy and medium or like a flow improver to your paint to thin it down. I would recommend using water or Lamy and medium personally on like a wet palette. That would be your best bet. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to darken up some of these shadowy areas. I'm going to make my brush a little smaller. And I'm just doing it in little layers and blending it as I go. So I'm kind of blending and adding contrast at the same time. When you're looking to make more contrast, what you're looking for is darker darks and lighter lights that are next to each other. That will create the greatest contrast as far as value. You can also do color and temperature contrast and things like that. But you have a lot of cool colors on your model. And you could do some temperature contrast maybe here with the skin. If you make it a little more warm, it'll contrast with all these cool colors. But we're going to mostly focus on value contrast. So I'm just making that darker as I go. Let's see. I'm going to work on a new layer. I forgot to open one up. So let's keep working now. So I want to show you a before and after. So this part in here, I'm going to go ahead and, I can't do much about that now, but for the future ones, it'll be a true before and after. I'm going to add some down here. And once I'm done adding in these like really dark sections, I'm going to add even more here, really darken it up. I'm also going to go in and make the brighter parts brighter. Do this glove a little bit. Do that little fold here. Even like in here. do this bottom part, that glove, because there'd be a shadow there, especially since it's under like this, like, I can't tell if it's a wing or like a piece of cloth or maybe some wind. That'll create a shadow, unless it's wind, I guess, but if it's a physical thing, there'll be a shadow there. That's kind of when you get more into volumetric painting, where you follow the actual planes of the model instead of just like highlighting every edge, but we don't have to worry about that too much. I'm going to start to blend this a little bit. I'm going to switch to my eraser. Actually, no, I'm going to go back to my brush, and I'm going to get that original color that was there, because I got a little bit too much of that dark color, and I'm just going to blend it back out. So you can do that with paint, just get that original color there and just glaze it in to create that transition. So let's see, I'm going to add a little bit more darks in here. Because that will really make this lighter area shine even more once I add to it. Get some down here, like that. Maybe I'll do some up here on the hat real quick, nothing too crazy. I'm not going to focus on every single color for this. I might do a little bit of purple, but I want to make sure that this video isn't like 2 hours long. There we go. Maybe add a little bit there to blend it a tiny bit. So if I zoom out, I can get rid of some of what I did, not all of it, because I did paint directly on for some of it on that shield, but you can see that difference already. There's a lot more contrast just from darkening up around those edges. But we can push it even more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this green, and if you mix in a little bit of yellow in it, so like if I go into my color picker and I bump it down towards yellow a tiny bit, maybe make it a little brighter, like maybe like here. We'll try that color. It's kind of like almost like a cavalite green or sybarite green, I forget which, but it's very similar to that. And I'm still at that really glazy consistency. I might even bump it down a little bit less because that's a pretty bright color, and the brighter it is, the more you might need to thin it. And I'm just gonna go in, and the shield's kind of like a reflective material, so it's not gonna be treated quite the same as the cloth. Because of that, it's kind of like a lacquer, I feel like. I feel like this was a good color choice. You could go even like add more white to it too, but I'm always a fan of adding yellow to greens to brighten them up. I think that that makes them more vibrant, which is what you want, especially if you're doing a tabletop miniature, because then it'll stand out better under like normal lighting circumstances. I'm gonna zoom in that's too much. Zoom in a little more. Make this brush a little smaller. Just like get a few parts. I'm not gonna do the whole entire piece. I'm actually just gonna do up at the top here. It's kind of like a selective highlight on the edge. And then maybe like a little bit here, like a little dot. I'm just like tapping to make it like it's painted like a dot. This one you could probably dilute a little less. It would be okay on like an edge highlight because you don't want it to run everywhere. And I'm gonna go back to that, or this color, because I got a little bit of the color here and I don't want it there. In fact, I might even get some of that dark color. Just go back over it a little bit to soften it. Very, very thin glaze. You can see if I get rid of that, how much contrast that's added to that green. And if I go back and use this light green again, like up here on on the glove. This, that yellowy green color really makes it pop from that like black green, like the really dark colored one. I could throw some in here. This is kind of like that shiny material, sort of like the shield. So I'm just gonna kind of do like this like Z shape almost, because it kind of follows into this crevice and also this curve, and then you have some here. I'll probably put some over here, like this. I know some of this like white in the picture is just from the reflection of the light. One little photo trick you can do to kind of get rid of that is put some tracing paper or baking paper over your light, and that'll soften it up if you're using an LED light. Do some on the, like, this is also kind of that lacquer metallic stuff. And if you want to push these even further, to show that it's shiny, you would want to add a little bit of white to it. Like if you want like a little point of light, basically. So like for instance, if I go into the color, I would just go maybe like more like up here. So it's still not pure white, but it'll look like it is. And I could like do some like little like reflections on like the parts that are lacquer, like that. Maybe have some over here. They're not huge. You don't need anything too crazy. Sometimes it helps to have like maybe like one larger one like that. Like throw some in here. Do like a few dots of color here. And then blend in between them with the more like glazy version of it. But I'm not doing that on the cloth. I'm just doing it on the parts that are shiny, because it's going to be reflecting light in a different way than a cloth would, because it's not soft like cloth. So I'm going to add a few more dots of light here. And I think maybe here. So if I zoom out, like this, you can see that huge difference in contrast, right? There's a lot more darks going on and a lot more lights. And I kind of just left the midtones the same. Those didn't change, right? You don't have to do that. Just focus on those dark areas and the light areas and keep everything else the same. That stuff is good. You don't have to worry about that. You got some really good, the fact that you blended these colors here shows me that you know how to blend, because that's really smooth. It looks great. It just needs some darks and some lights. Like, so for instance, I'll do one of these real quick too. Let's see, so I'm gonna select that purple. We're gonna darken it. We're not using pure black, we're not using pure white. That'll make it look less realistic. So either find a darker purple or mix some black into the purple, but don't use pure black or pure white, ever. It won't look realistic if you do that. And I'm actually gonna make the opacity a little bit better. I'm gonna go back to 50. So it's gonna show that color a little more. And I'm just kind of going where those lines would be, kind of in between. You could actually probably pin wash that and be okay. And actually, I'm gonna make it a little more opaque. See that color a little better, or maybe I just need to darken it a little more. So you can see that it's like almost black, but it's still purple. I'm just using that at the very bottom. Maybe like a dot there. Maybe like along here, because there's that metal piece. Actually made a little tiny mistake. Got it on the metal a little bit, so I'm gonna get rid of that. Okay. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna select that pink color up here. Actually, get that one. Go back to the brush, and I'm just gonna glaze that in too. And notice it's, it looks like it's almost white, even though it's not, it's a pink. I'm gonna blend it down a tiny bit. I'm gonna make it more like a glaze consistency. And it's also going to kind of cover over those light spots that we're hitting it. But those can also be a good indication of where to put your highlights. So like if I want to go in and make this color even brighter, it's kind of like an off-white now. I can go into those spots where there was a photo reflection and add a little bit of light to it. Like that. And then if I compare, we can see there's, even though like this purple didn't change at all, it looks different, right? Because there's more darks, there's more lights. You could even add more dark in here, but I think you get the idea. So great work, Archon Sarah. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in a comment, send them as a message. I'd be happy to explain something further if you need it. But I hope this was really helpful for you. We're going to go ahead and move on to the next one. All right, so for this next one, we're looking at this mini by Bad at Painting Minis on Instagram. And he wanted, his area of improvement was for the cloth highlights and shading. So it'll be pretty similar to the last one actually, but a different color, which I think is pretty cool. I really like this turquoise color. It's one of my favorite colors to use as well. So what I'm gonna do is very similar to the last time. I'm gonna pick out like this darker version of the color. Actually, I might grab that one because it's a little darker. And I'm gonna go to my brush tool. And again, I have my opacity pretty thin, so you're gonna wanna, if you glaze this in a little bit, especially for the shadows, oh, that's too dark. It will make things a little bit easier for you. So I'm gonna start in here. I think my brush is just too big. Let me make that smaller. Yeah. So I'm gonna just kind of like line these crevices a little bit. Because with shading, obviously you want your darks to be dark. And the lighter that the other sections are, the more dark that will look. So like if you have this, you could have a just semi-dark color next to a white color and it'll look dark compared to like if you had it next to a darker color. Because color is relative like that. I'm gonna add a little bit in here too. So I feel like in this little curve, it's gonna get kind of dark. Like there might be a shadow cast there all the way across. Oh, and I need to open a new layer before I forget. Luckily, I didn't get too far in. I'm gonna add some shadows under this highlight here because you can tell that cloth is bent, so it's gonna cast a shadow there. I kind of like that there's like these little cracks in the fabric, so I'm gonna accentuate that a little bit. Just kind of play into that a little more. And like little ones here, that. And that'll also like make it look a lot more detailed and old because the skeleton's been around probably for a while, and that cloth might be a little bit crusty. Maybe it has like all kinds of stuff all over it. And I might end up even making some parts even darker, but we'll see if it actually needs that. I'm gonna do some in here because I feel like some of those weapons might cast some shadows on things. I might kind of like add some shadows in here like that. And notice it's just a glaze right now. In fact, I might actually go back with that original color. Make my brush a little bigger. I'm just gonna blend it a little bit. I feel like it was maybe a little too much. Go back now. One more time. Zoom in a little bit. I like a little bit easier. I'm actually gonna make it an even thinner glaze like that. And now I'm just gonna go in and kind of get these areas in here. because they're going to be dark as well. I'm going to darken that up a tiny bit more, like right under, not the whole thing, just like right under it. Because even if you look at like shadows, they aren't consistent across the whole thing. It can change in how dark it is, how light it is, all that kind of stuff. I'm going to darken up a little bit around where that sword is. Maybe like in here too. I'm going to darken that up. You can see that it's starting to get some contrast there. Like if I go and get rid of what I did, that's just from adding shadows, like more shading to it. And you can go, you know, even further with that. Like if I actually don't need to change the color yet. If I just add more and more of this dark color, if I add more layers of it, or even like add less water to it, so if I make it more opaque, gonna get a little darker. I might actually even get some of that black. And actually, no, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna go back to this color. So I don't want pure black. I'm just gonna go down a little darker, so it's like that dark blue. I'm gonna bring my brush back to around like a really watery consistency. Use my eraser. I get to cheat a little bit since it's digital. I'm going to make that a little darker. Again, just in that one spot. And now, even better. Maybe I'll add some in here as well. Nothing too crazy, just a little bit. It's very easy to go overboard with shadows, so it's important that we don't. I'm also going to just kind of shade that a little bit. I'm doing it over the whole thing, which might seem kind of strange, but just because something is raised doesn't mean that it's necessarily highlighted. And because it kind of goes like under this main one that sticks out more, I feel like that would be more shadowed than the one above it. So now all we got to do is we need to get that lighter color and do some highlights. So I think I'm gonna pick out like that color there. I'm gonna go back to my brush. And I'm still using kind of that glazy consistency. Zoom in a little more. Make my brush a little bit smaller so I can get these little tiny creases a little bit more easily. When you're using your brush, as long as you have a good point, it doesn't matter if you're using a big brush, a little brush. It's the point that matters. So even though I'm using this tiny little point, think of that as the point of the brush, not the size of the brush. I might add like a little bit there. Maybe some here, there. And you'll be able to notice once I go back and forth, you'll see a pretty big difference. I'm gonna add some, especially here. I'm just kind of like adding more of that color. I might even add a little bit brighter of a blue in this spot to show that the light is hitting there, like that. I'm also going to put some of it here on this, maybe on the tip right here too, because I feel like the light's going to hit that as well. Maybe over here, because this one I feel like, along with this one, will be the two brightest. And now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take this really like light blue. It's like an ice blue. I just showed my age there. And we're going to use it too. I might even brighten that up a little bit as well. It might not be dark or light enough for what I need. But it is going to make a difference. It can be good to build up your colors instead of like just using one dark, one middle, and one high color. As far as the value, it can be beneficial to build up. You can see here, I'm using an off-white. I'm never using pure white. It's like a white with a little bit of blue mixed in. And here, I'm just going to use it in like the brightest spots, not everywhere. You use it everywhere, it's going to look kind of funky, for cloth at least. For things like metal, you can have really big sections that are bright. In fact, that's actually a good thing. But for cloth, usually you just want it in little sections. Throw some in here. I'm not going to do the whole thing, but I think you're getting the idea. I'll do over here, since I've been focusing on this too. Do it on both of those. Do it up here. Just like in the top part, I'm not going to go all the way down, kind of like what I talked about with the last miniature. Just because there's a whole edge there doesn't mean you got to follow it the whole way. That is like one of the biggest pitfalls, one of the biggest things that people think they have to do that they really don't, and it'll save you time, which is really important. So if I go back here, look at that difference. We took what you had, which is a great base, and we just added on top of it, right? So you don't need to get rid of anything. Everything that's here is good. You're on the right track. You just need to push the lights and push the darks in the right places, and you'll get some really nice, realistic looking cloth there. Notice how smooth it is? That's from the glazing. So I really want you to try to like thin your paints a lot. Again, if you have a wet palette, that really helps you mix and thin and blend your paints together much more easily. And you can even make one with just a sponge and some baking paper. You don't have to go out and buy one. But yeah. All right, let's get our next one ready. This one is from Bearded Idiot Paints, and he wanted me to focus on pushing past the tabletop standard, which clearly he's done a great job of. He has, you know, his base colors, he has shades, he has, it looks like some highlighting going on, and he even did transfers up here on the like missile weapon. So, and even his skin is really good that he did. He did a really good job of making the eye. Eyes are really tricky, and he did a great job. So I think what I'm going to focus on the most is how to push that blue armor, because that's most of the model, and that's what people are going to look at. So I think that's what we're going to focus on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this highlight color that he already has used. Looks like maybe like a Calgar blue. And I'm not going to make my brush quite as thinned out. It's going to be more like normal paint. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just paint more edges, honestly. And I'm going to make my brush bigger because it's okay if that first highlight is a little chunky. It also doesn't have to be everywhere. Focusing here on the gauntlet, although I don't need to go all the way. Right. And it's okay if you get some hard edges here because it's armor. It doesn't have to be super smooth, anything like that. Redo that. Curves can be tricky when you're using a mouse. I'm going to add to this curve. You especially want to focus on these corners. Those are going to be what hits the light, or what the light hits the most. So like even here, I'm going to add. Of course I forgot to do a new layer, so I'm going to open that up now. And I'll just show you the difference on a part I haven't worked on yet until this point. Highlight here. Oops. Okay. This can take a while. It's one of the things that I love painting Space Marines, but I can't do it too frequently because it burns me out for this one step, because you've got to do it in most places for it to look right. If you're going for edge highlighting, like traditional Games Workshop method, there's other ways to do it too. But if you're going for it, for that kind of style, it does take time. Again, I'm just kind of using like a Calgar blue type color. I'm pretty sure is what it is. I don't actually have that color myself. I'm also getting these edges, that edge. You also might, I forget if I mentioned it already, but it's kind of a chunky highlight. That's okay. We're going to be doing another highlight that's not as chunky, and it's also going to be brighter. Do a few here. Just kind of in the corners. They don't have to be everywhere for these. Just in the places where it'll help define each part. And the fact that he has already some there, it looks like, will make this easier. But really, don't worry about it being too thick for this stage. It is okay. I'm not even going to worry about these parts either. Do one there. Do one there. Might throw one right there, even though it's not a super hard edge. Break things up a little bit. But you kind of get the idea. I'm not going to do too much more. I'm not going to do the whole thing. Alright. Actually, let me do this though. I'm going to do this little hood. Razor tool, because I definitely messed up. There we go. Like this curvy part as well. Again, I didn't quite hit the edge, so we're going to redo that. But once I get this highlight done, the trick is to get a color that you think is too bright. So for instance, like when I'm painting my Black Templars, I use a Bad on Black Dark Reaper, which is super dark gray for my first edge highlight. And then I go all the way to Fenrisian Gray, which is really, really bright. So I'm going to go all the way this way to like that color. And it's going to feel too bright at first. But when it's all together, it's going to make sense. I also made my brush a little bit smaller, so I'm being more focused with my points here. And I'm just going to do these hard corners like this. I'm not even going to do all of them. I'm just doing some. So like here. In fact, I'm even going to bump up the opacity because I think it could be brighter even. There we go. That's better. So I'm still thinning the paint, but not a lot. I want it to be kind of creamy. Kind of like semi-melted butter. I'm just going in here and just doing a selective highlight. I'm not doing everywhere. I'm focusing on corners. And this highlight does not take nearly as long, even though you have to be much more focused with it. It's a lot faster because you're not doing it everywhere. Might do one up here where the light would hit that shoulder pad. There, there. You can do any rivets. That one. This corner. This corner. And by doing this, you're adding two highlights, right? I guess you kind of started the one. So it's kind of like just adding one extra. Kind of pushing the one you had a little bit more, adding one extra one on top just in these little corner areas where the light reflects the most. And you can see it's making a huge difference. It stands out way more. This might not be something you want to do on like every single model, you know, if you're like trying to get a army together really quick, you might do this on like maybe just your characters or your sergeants and things like that. Throw in here. But you know, you could do this on every character. That's what I do personally. But that's just, you know, that's personal choice. You can do, you know, as much or as little as you want. That's kind of the beauty of it. I might do those, just like kind of like little T shapes almost. Do that corner, that corner, right here, right there. Maybe like a little bit of a line there, and a little bit here, just to kind of match it. A little here to kind of show that there's light in that section. Oop, I do not like the angle of that because I did not follow the curve. There we go, that's better. Again, this can be a little chunky too. It doesn't have to be like perfect, because when you zoom out, when you see this from far away, you're not going to notice that kind of stuff. But it's not worth, you know, stripping the model over. If I zoom out, you can't tell. But let's look at before and after, excluding that one part I forgot to do. Look at that. That is a huge difference just by doing little minor things. I didn't even do it everywhere, and it already looks, you know, like it's a step above. So that is my recommendation. Get that color you used to highlight for the first highlight and just do more of it, and then get like this kind of, this almost even looks like Fenrisian blue. You could probably use that color, or Fenrisian gray, I'm sorry. Either that, or maybe I think Hoeth blue is another brighter one that you could use, but something that looks like that would work really well. All right, let's go to our next one. Our fourth miniature is painted by AR Minis. It's this really cool librarian, and he wanted to focus on like a worn leather look on the cloak. So what we want to do, what I recommend doing first, is looking at pictures of worn leather, and usually, I mean, there's all kinds of worn leather, but if you want a brown leather like this, it looks like he's kind of on the right track, because he has like this really like almost Caucasian skin color along the edge, and a lot of the time it'll wear with that type of color. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna zoom in quite a bit. I'm gonna grab it, and for this step, you're going to want a pretty sharp brush. All right, so I'm going to make it pretty tiny. And usually leather will wear around the edges. Actually make my brush a tiny bit bigger. So first, you know, focus on those edges. You can do normal edge highlights to begin with, right? Especially around like the bottom areas, because that's going to wear on all the rocks and things like that. So that's a good idea to wear it there. Then what you're going to want to do, I'm actually going to plug in my tablet to do this because I think it'll be easier, is I'm going to make it slightly smaller. You're going to want to use like the point of your brush before I do that. Oop, that's not what I wanted to do. Oh, you know what? I realized I didn't add a layer. That's why that happened. Okay. And what you're going to want to do is just make like little nick marks on it. And some of mine are going to probably go off the edge, just because I'm painting on a picture. But some of them can be long. You can do different dots. I'll have to clean that up. I actually might just switch back to using my finger, because it seems like there's a little bit of a delay on this tablet thing I'm using. But basically, I can do some that are maybe more glazy, like in here, and I can do some that are going this way, maybe with like a slightly bigger brush. I can wear it in. Actually, maybe that one. As I zoom out, it's starting to get more of a worn look. It's going to take time, but you will get that look over time. You can even, like if I pull some of this color in, you can make the wear look a little more natural by blending it in those like darker areas, like in here. So it looks like it's wearing from like that dark brown into this more like kind of middle, like a, looks like it's maybe like a Mournfang brown or something like that. Might even use something here. I'm making scratches going all kinds of ways. Just to help it blend. And this is kind of like thinned down, like almost as if I added some water to it, because that'll help you out a little bit. That'll give you that kind of like, even though it's scratchy, you want it to be kind of soft, and that helps with that. I'm kind of going back and forth now. I'm about to pull in some of that original color. You might notice I'm also making the marks different lengths. That will help you out too. Same with like different sizes, like some might be bigger, but most will be pretty tiny. So if I zoom out now, from far away, it's starting to look like it's getting worn a little bit more in this area. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go back to that original color. I'm gonna bump the opacity down a little bit so it blends a little bit better. And I'm gonna make my brush a little smaller. And I'm gonna start to wear it on top of that brown. Kind of like this. And you can see it's really starting to look like it's actually wearing. Clean up that bottom a little bit. And it looks like this part is a little more like worn than the rest. So I'm actually gonna like use a pretty big brush and glaze it a little bit. Although I don't like what I just did there, so I'm gonna undo that. But kind of like along those bottom edges and like maybe like where this light is hitting might be a little bit brighter. But you can see that texture, like the model already kind of has a texture. You can see it here. And if you just kind of lean into that and paint the strokes of your paint to kind of replicate that and make it stand out more, you're gonna get a really like beaten leather look like that. But again, I would focus kind of on the areas where it would wear. So like the bottoms of the cloak here, just like, start by edge highlighting the areas to help map it out, kind of like I did here. And then you can beat it up. You can also do it in areas where like, these, like this belt buckle, that would absolutely scratch up the leather. So maybe like around that area, and the key, and this lock, and like all these cables, like it's gonna scratch against that leather up here. And so you don't have to make it so bright necessarily, but even if you use that like middle brown color to show that it's starting to scuff it up, like go in here, make this brush smaller, and if I start just like kind of like adding these lines just near it, like it'll be dark, so it'll still look like there's shadows going on there. You can always wash it after too if it needs to be darkened up a little bit. But I'm just adding these dark these middle brown Mournfang brown lines. Add some texture. And it's already helping. you know, you could go even further than that. Like, you can make it more worn by doing a little glaze of the color, and then like you could pull in a little bit of this, just like not do as much of it, just like a tiny bit. Or you could do that and then glaze over it with the brown to kind of make it more subtle like that. Although I don't personally care for that. I'd rather it be scuffed, but you could do that. It would look better with paint than it would in Photoshop. So like if I go back and forth here, aside from that edge highlight that I seem to always forget to start a new layer for, it makes a huge difference. Again, like if you have any questions about that or need extra help, let me know in a comment or a message, and I'd be happy to help you push it further or explain something more. Don't feel like you can't ask. We have 2 more to do. They're by one painter and his wife who doesn't have an account, so they're both submitted under the same account. This one is from Bright Minis, and he wanted me to focus on texture and adding texture, so kind of like what I focused on for AR Minis. So you can see here he has lots of different textures going on. He has skin that's alive, he has skin that's dead, there's hair, there's shiny metal, there's like painted metal, there's cloth, there's skulls, and all those things feel different from each other. And the way that you differentiate those is by making them look like different textures. And the way you do that is with different kinds of paint strokes. So for instance, if I take this color, I go to my brush, even like the size of your brush can matter for texture. And if I just like kind of paint in like this kind of glazy, oh, I just realized I need to make a new layer. I'm glad I remembered. So we're gonna start that over. Brush a little smaller too. Just like in these areas, I'm making it soft, right? Because it's cloth. So I have a bigger brush. The smaller your brush is, the sharper your lines will be, and that's not always so good for cloth. And I'm also using kind of like glazy colors. Actually, let me go here. So like for instance, I'm glazing that in. But I'm gonna blend it back a little bit, right? Because it's kind of blocky looking, which isn't so good. In fact, actually, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna make it more opaque because I think that will solve the problem more easily. So I'm using these big blobby shapes, right? I'm not being super fine because that's not gonna help you with things like cloth. You want it to look soft. And so you can see here, now I'm using that same color and just adding more layers because it's a bright color, right? And because the paint is like kind of watery, it makes it look soft, which is what you want. I might add like a little bit of highlight here. I might shrink my brush a little bit just to get like those a little bit better. Oops. Don't want to paint the metal. Make that a little brighter. And now you can see it looks a lot softer. Now, if you do want kind of scratchy cloth, kind of like a burlap material, you could add lines through it, but I figured this will be softer since there's all these other, you know, like I think actually your skin is fine. I wouldn't do anything to it as far as texture, but you can see it's very different, right? The paint here is more watery. You can almost like see the transitions, whereas your skin has smoother blends, if that makes sense. And so by doing that, you show that they're different materials. Here on the belt, I'll zoom in a tiny bit. I can use maybe like this color and a tiny, like the tip of my brush. And I need to make this more opaque. Let's try 50%. Yeah, there we go. And since it's leather, kind of like with the last video, I'm just doing lines. They're all going to be kind of different as far as the length of the lines. And the more lines you add, the more directions you add, the more realistic it will look. Right? You don't want it to look too regular. So if I zoom out, now it looks like it's kind of like a cracked leather. I could even like maybe like in here where it's a little bit more worn, I could add a little more. Okay, let's look at the red. So I think maybe we'll do this one. It's on the right track, but we can make it shinier. So what we're gonna do to give it kind of like a lacquered look, similar to the first miniature we looked at, I'm gonna darken up a lot of these sections with some glazes, but that is too opaque. That is not glazy enough. Let's try that again. You can still see that, you know, it needs to be blended a bit to get like that nice transition, but we'll do that in a minute. We want to get these darks in first. I'm even going to go in and add a little more black to it. So I can go in here where it's going to be really dark from that metal before going in, picking that color, and blending it a bit. This can take time, can take lots of layering, but ultimately it'll be worth it. I'm going to pick that color now. And really actually down here, I'm not going to necessarily blend it. I'm just gonna make, I mean, it'll blend a little bit, but I'm gonna make it just not as big of a section. Now I'm picking this lighter color. I don't like what I did there, so I'm gonna redo it. Like this. And I'm just going in down here at the bottom in like a kind of triangle shape, and I'm lightening it up a little bit. Remember, you're still glazing, so like if you feel like the glaze isn't transitioning the way you want, just take the other color and blend over it a little bit, mix it with the original color you were using. That'll help a little bit. I'm gonna take that color now and I'm gonna add some white to it. Go up here. That. I'm going to add some bright points to it. In fact, actually, no, instead of doing that, I'm going to go back. I'm just going to increase the opacity. That'll help a little bit. Make it faster. So just add a little bit less water to your paint on this bottom edge, maybe like up here. That. You can see it's getting more of a lacquer kind of look. I could probably go even brighter though, so I'm going to do that. Let's go over here. Brush smaller. I went over a little bit, so I'm going to fix that. You can even add some in here. Actually, I don't like that one. Here though. Yeah, It's all about finding the shine points. If you're not sure, you can shine a light on the model. Sometimes that's the hardest part, is finding the right place to put a light. Actually, I think it's a little too bright, so I'm going to take that original color, make my brush a little bigger, and just paint over it so it's not as like bright. I'm just glazing over it. And now that helps it stand out as like a painted lacquered material. It's like super shiny, but it shines differently than the actual metallics. And then we have our cloth that's different, which I actually want to add a little bit more to. I'm gonna take that dark color. Actually, darken that up a little bit. I think it needs it there. I think your hair is okay. I think you did a good job, especially on the beard, making it look like hair. Like there's light points here and here and here. And you didn't make the mistake of highlighting every single little thing. So with hair, you don't need to do that. Same with here. I like that the skin looks like super dead. One thing you could do real quick is take that. I'm gonna get some more green into it. It's too opaque. Maybe make it a little smaller too. And just like maybe like in the shadows, just add. I don't need to do that. Just add a little bit of green. Nothing crazy. In fact, I'll probably blend it back out a little bit with this original color, just to help it settle. You could even use colors like blue. So like, if I pull that and I go to make it blue instead, you could add that to like the cheeks, and that'll help it look like it's like, you know, super dead. We like do the eyebrows with it. So now you have greens and blues in there. Lots of, you know, you can have purples, all kinds of cool tones to show that it's not alive anymore. There we go. I think that'll work. So if we zoom out, do before and after. We can see now there's lots of different textures going on with different size paint strokes and different amounts of like water in your paint. Let's see, oh, there's a fly in front of me, okay. So now we're gonna do the last one. This last one is also from the Bright Minis account. It is his wife. And she painted the Sister of Battle. It's pretty cool. And she wanted me to focus on highlights and general areas of improvement. So it seems like kind of a theme with highlighting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this color she already used, and I'm going to use it too. Although what I need to do first is make a new layer. And I'm going to bump up the opacity because we don't need it to be super, you know, glazy. You can just use paint with a tiny amount of water in it. And similar to what I did with the Terminator before, I'm just going to go and do most of the edges with this color. You don't really have to do every single one, but it does help if you do as many as possible. It doesn't have to be super, super, super neat. It can be chunky, so don't worry about it being like too thin or anything like that, because that will be the next highlight. I do really like this purple color scheme that she chose. I feel like it's really unique to have like that dark purple with that white. It's really striking. So really great job on picking those colors. I know that she's like a stickler for coming up with her own schemes. She doesn't like to do ones that already exist, and that's not always easy. So she did a pretty good job with that. get like these little edges. It's like a kind of like a leather material, I guess. We'll do these little rivets. You always want to get the rivets because those will catch the light. Do that edge. Could do like a little highlight there. You don't have to though, but I always feel like the light will shine there, and even like in here. I'm gonna get all these, including there. Can't really see all of them, but I'll do what I can see. Same with like these edges. Oh, and there's a little rivet there. There. I actually wouldn't worry about this line here. I wouldn't do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the original color. Just kind of paint over it, because you don't really need that there. I see what you were thinking with that, but you don't really have to do it. It's kind of like something that is just an extra step that you don't need to worry about. It's not really necessary. Let's see, I'm not going to do the gloves. I'm just going to do the main armor. And kind of like with the, I'm actually going to just get rid of that too. Or I'll erase it because I can do that. I don't really think it needs it in this case. Anyway, kind of like with the Terminator again, what I'm going to do is get a color that is significantly brighter, to the point where it feels too bright. So I'm thinking maybe that one. So kind of like a demonette hide is what it reminds me of, something along those lines. And we're going to use the point of our brush now, and we're just going to use it in a few spots. We're going to do all these rivets, which I forgot to do on this one. That's okay. Do that first. Just a little dot. It doesn't even have to be the whole rivet. You don't need to worry about that. And once we do that, we want to focus on the parts that the light is going to hit. So like for instance here, just in the corners, maybe like this higher edge. You can even do like dots. I'm kind of doing like these T shapes, but really you could just do dots and be okay in most of these cases. I'm gonna do the tops of these lines. I'm only gonna do it like here, here on that. Just here. Do one here, there. Be like in these two spots, so like not the whole thing. There, 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 right there. Basically in these corners. Now if we zoom out, I guess that was too far. Actually, I'm going to make one other change here. And it's going to be that I would recommend cleaning this up, because that can make a huge difference. That'll make the line look really straight. You do that. I know it's not a perfect blend, but you get the idea. And one other thing I'm going to do, or one thing that I think that I should have done, and this is my bad, is make this highlight thinner. You can see it's kind of the same size almost as the one before, and I was just going at it and I didn't think about that. So I would make that a little bit thinner. It'll look a little bit better if you do. But you can see that difference that it makes. Let me zoom out a little bit. It'll make it look like it's more reflective. I am going to do one more thing. I'm going to show you something for the cloth. Take that kind of grayish color. I'm going to push it to be more of a, actually, I'm going to use it as it is. And I'm going to make it pretty thin, kind of like a glaze or a wash. And just like under these sections where there would be shadows, I'm going to add it. I'm actually going to pull some colors from the other sleeve that I think are really nice too. First, let's blend that back just a tiny bit. Nothing too crazy. I'm actually gonna bump up the opacity though, because you can highlight this cloth a little more too, I think. I don't like that. Just in some spots though, nothing too crazy. Just enough to show that it's different from the armor. Right, because it's pretty white. It looks like you did wash it. Just needs some highlights mostly. Although I would wash this one a little bit more. Highlight those little things. I could probably actually use lower opacity since it's cloth. Switch that a little bit so it's softer. Basically add more water to your highlight for the cloth than you did for the armor. I'm actually gonna brighten that up a tiny bit. In this area. Because I think the light would be hitting that right in this spot here. So I think you actually want that to be light. Same with down here. Even though it's like at the bottom, that doesn't always mean it's dark. It doesn't have to be the lightest part of the color, you know, the brightest highlight or anything like that. It can still be a little darker, but some of those mistakes. I think I'm gonna pull some of that, bring it over here to this area. Maybe darken that a little bit. Pull that color, darken it even more, like right under. So that's gonna cast a shadow. Right. And this one, because it's pointing downward, you probably would want it to be shadowed like this. And I'm just trying to follow the curves of the cloth, like wherever it's kind of indented a little bit, that's where you would want those to be. Make my brush a little smaller. Just kind of follow that. Go back to that color. Just kind of clean it up a little bit if that happens. I don't think that'll happen on the model because it'll be raised, but you know, if it does, just repaint it. No big deal. I'm also gonna brighten up this. I think that's still too dark though. So what I'm gonna do, I'm actually gonna pull this color, make my brush really big. I do a big glaze over it just to lighten it a little bit, because I think it's too dark for what it is. And sometimes that happens. Sometimes you gotta do a little bit of back and forth with it. You may not get it the right time, right the first time. That's okay. I think I might pull that color. Here. That. And then now I think I'm going to take that color and just do this before going in and clean. Oop, that's too much. Clean up that edge. I think that's a little better. So let's look at the before and after. Yeah. Hopefully you found that helpful. Again, if you have questions, let me know. I'd be happy to answer. I know these models are kind of tricky, but you're doing a great job on them, especially since you don't have that much experience. You've done a really great job, even with your color choice. So yeah, fantastic. Well, that's it. That is the end of the first Hobby Clinic video. I hope you all found it helpful. Again, if you did find it helpful, please like, subscribe, leave comments, ask questions. What would you do to change some of these? What did you like about them? Let us know down in the comments. And thank you to everyone who submitted a picture. If this goes over well, I might do some future episodes of this. So keep an eye out. I always try to make a post asking for entries if that does happen. Yeah, so thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye.